in all of this, with all the discussions with different people, I've not heard anyone in Hull blame the people of Iceland. I think they understand why Iceland extended its fishing limits. I think they are extremely grateful and realise that Iceland offered generous quotas to the British fleet, and the blame is very, very squarely placed on the British government.
For centuries, Grimsby and Hull were home to Britain's largest distant water fishing fleet. Night after night, fully manned trawlers set out for Iceland.
In 1840, Hull and Grimsby perhaps had a dozen very small fishing vessels between them. By 1870, you could argue that they were the leading fishing ports in the world. During the 1880s, Hull and Grimsby adopted steam and began building purpose-built steam vessels. And after 1890, 1891 to be probably precise, these fishing vessels started, the trawlers started to visit Iceland.
The only thing we could ever see to improve our parents' life, our life, was to go to sea, to be a fisherman. It was an ambition, I think, because we watched our fathers, we watched the neighbours, we watched everyone. And the only money what was in Hull at that time was the fisherman's money. There was the people who had just that extra bit of money.
When a fisherman come home, he was the smartest man in the world. He had his suits and he felt $1 million. Apart from the money, he felt $1 million. They designed their own suits, their own shoes, and had them made in shops. They created square-toed shoes so they could stand nearer the bar.
Sometimes you settled in debt. When I first started fishing, and you used to look at your hands and think, good God, they'll never heal up. And then within 36 hours, you was back to sea again.
Well, the responsibility as a skipper was huge, really. He was given a ship, 20 men, go and make it pay. There was always somebody there waiting for your job. And so therefore, you used to put your men through hell and earth. You know, I don't know how, I couldn't do it now. I couldn't put men through what I used to have to put men through. I often wake up at night with bad dreams, yeah, and I do, seriously, of the weather that we use for fishing. And I say, thank God I never lost a man, and I never maimed a man, but I was very, very fortunate.
Until 1952, international agreements allowed British trawlers within 3 miles of the Icelandic coast.
Þau veit alveg upp á 30 míl og helst fyrir innan hana. Sko 3 mílur, það er tæpið 6 kílómetrar. En svo var þetta líka með Bretana og íslensku stífstjórnum enda líka. Þetta var nú svona íþrótt að fiska fyrir innan. Það þótti engin maður með mönnum að hann gæti þýðið að fara inn fyrir og fá svolítið betri fisk.
When there was no fish on the outside, I had to go straying inside. You know, it wasn't out of badness, it was more for what we call a crack. You know, if you thought there was a bit more fish inside, well, you go for it. Just have a little game of cat and mouse with the Icelandic Coast Guard. They used to love me, I used to love them.
On the 15th of May 1952, Iceland extended the limit to 4 miles. Flags were lowered to half-mast in all British fishing ports. The Grimsby Evening Telegraph dubbed it Black Thursday, the darkest day the British fishing industry had ever known.
Extending from 3 miles to 4 miles was not a problem, not from the fisherman's point of view. It was the point-to-point that they introduced, which didn't just cut out hundreds of square miles of fishing ground inside places like Breedy Bay and Faxhoy and whatnot, but it really just denied you any shelter. You couldn't get into those places to shelter from the weather. So when the weather really got atrocious, you had to stop fishing. Or force the elements and force your men to work through extreme conditions. And that's unfortunately what happened.
Man til einu sinni þá komum við þarna í vitlausu veðri vestfjörðunum og sáum hann fullt af tógurum út af hérna Súgandafirði. Og þá komum við einum sem að toga. Og hann játaði strax og hann sagði að það var bara spurt hafsögumanninn, hann hafði verið á Ísafirði og spurt hafsögumanninn að því hvaða há sekt væri fyrir landhelgisbrot. Og þegar hann fekk vita hvað það var há sekt, þá tók hann sénsinn.
Well, in the earlier, the first time I was fined about £2,000. Second time about £4,000. The third kept going up as the years went by, you know. The rates, especially if Iceland wanted a new Coast Guard vessel.
Mér fannst alltaf skemmtilegast að vera með Bretum. Þeir börðust eins og ljón til þess að byrja með, en þeir sáu það sko að leikurinn var tapaður, og það bara viðurkenndi það.
All your trawlers stop fishing. Otherwise, I have to report your action and you may later be prosecuted for this unlawful act.
Og aðra þjóðir eins og til dæmis Belgar og sérstaklega Belgar, þeir voru svo meira að þeir fóru að gráta. Það var það versta sem ég komist í mínu sjómennskuferli, að vera með grátandi skipstjóra inni hjá sér og hóta honum 20 og stórum sektum.
But I've got to be honest and say, in every court case I was involved in, I never ever knew one of the Icelandic Coast Guard officers to tell a lie. They always stated the facts as there was. I wanted to congratulate them on their navigation and their chart work, but I daren't, else I'd be dropping myself in it. But they were very fair in that respect.
The Icelanders continued to worry about overfishing. In 1958, fishery limits were discussed at the first Law of the Sea conference in Geneva. Pressure from the small nations to set a 12-mile limit was resisted, and no compromise could be found. On the 1st of September, the Icelandic government extended their limit to 12 miles.
When the Icelanders moved to 12 miles, that provoked a very strong reaction in the distant water trawling trade. Basically because they wished and they realised that this was a threat to their livelihood.
For Britain, the 12-mile limit was a violation of international law. The Royal Navy was sent to protect the distant water fishing fleet.
Breska ríkisstjórnir senda flotann á vettvang og beita sér jafn ákveðið og hart í þessum málum allt til loka af þremur megin ástæðum. Það prinsip að ræða fyrir Breta og Bretar mjög prinsipfastir menn. Og Bretar sögðu Íslendingar fara ekki að lögum og þeir ógna hagsmunum sem við höfum lengi haft á úthafinu og þar af leiðandi bregðumst við með þessum hætti. Í öðru lagi var tilfinningalegar ástæður að ræða sem áttu rætur í því að togara sjómennirnir í Hull og Grimsby áttu ákveðna innstæðu, ef svo má segja, þetta áttu nú við framan af frekar en í síðari deilunum sem laut að frammistöðu þeirra í síðari heimsstyrjöldinni og henni hafði ekki verið gleymt og síðan var auðvitað verulega staðbundna hagsmuni að ræða í Hull og Grimsby, einnig Fleetwood framan af.
Það var mikill hugur í varðskipsmönnum að reyna að standa sig sem best og reyna að sýna Bretunum að það að herskipir hættu okkur ekki neitt.
Það var líka sko með 12 mílurnar, það voru önnur manngerð við stjórn á bresku skipunum heldur en 50 og 200. Þá það eins og Andersson sko og yfirmennir á þeim skipum, þeir voru oft með hótunar að bara við vorum alltaf með byssuna á lofti, sko, tók von á þeim og ég bara, ef við gerum þetta, þá bara sekkið þeir. Og þannig að þeir fóru með þetta hugarfór hingað, en þeir bara máttu ekki drepa mig hérna. En þeir voru alltaf með kjaftinn opið um það, bara sökkaður ef þú gerir eitthvað.
Commander Eiríkur Kristoffersson of the Icelandic flagship Thor attempted to arrest the trawler Northern Foam, found fishing inside the new 12-mile limit.
Þetta ágæta skip Northern Foam var að þvælast þarna í lögbrottum og Eiríkur sendi okkur borð í hann til að taka hann bara á venjulegan hátt og við vorum hann borð í honum að vera þar í einhverja smástund, klukkutíma eða svoleiðis þegar freigátan Eastbourne kom. Og þeir sendu stóran vélbát með fullan af mönnum með alvæpni og herskipið sagði sínum mönnum að fara með okkur borð í Þór en Eiríkur bara neitaði að taka við okkur og sigldi í burtu.
In these somewhat muddled circumstances, the Coast Guards unexpectedly found themselves guests of the Royal Navy.
Við vorum hérna gestir hennar hátignar borð í Eastbourne og við bjuggum bara með þeim eins og þeir. En við fengum ekki rómskammtinn, Íslendingarnir. Það var talið þarna af hæstaráðinu að við gætum orðið of stríðsglaðir ef við fengjum rámið. Nú, það var einn Íri þarna borð. Hann var háseti. Og hann var dálítið vel hlýðhollur okkur, vildi að við tækjum skipið og sigldum því í höfn á Íslandi. Og ég segi það ekki að það málið hafi ekki verið rætt.
After 11 days being kept aboard HMS Eastbourne, Commander Anderson offered the Coast Guards a boat so they could row ashore to the American NATO base at Keflavik.
Og einu vandamálin sem voru eftir það að ameríska herstjórnin var eitthvað óánægð með það að varnarlið á Keflavíkurflugvelli vissi ekkert af því að kom heilt herskip næstum því upp að bryggju í Keflavík á þess að þeir vissu af því.
Unsure of the Royal Navy's orders, the ill-equipped Icelandic Coast Guard was reluctant to confront the trawlers. Instead, they kept a log of all the boats found fishing inside the 12-mile limit.
We would see the Icelandic gunboat come alongside the trawler and he would stand with a loud hailer and he would say, "Skipper, skipper," and we would all wave to him and get out of it and all this, you see. And then, of course, they would lower a boat with the Icelandic naval officers stood with the oar and a revolver on the hip.
Þeir gerðu nú mótleik ef þeir grunu okkur við ætlum að senda bát yfir að stoppaði hjá þeim. Þá voru búin að búið til spjót og ætlaði að skutla þessi í gummibátana ef við kæmum yfir. Og svo voru það með heita gufu sem þeir voru tilbúin að sprauta okkur og þeir höfðu það þannig að þeir girtu bakborðshliðina á skipinu þannig að við kæmum með netum, þannig að við komumst ekki borð þeim megin en trollið var stjórnborðsmegin og þá var maður að fara undir vírana og það var gæti verið lífshættulegt þegar þeir myndu slá úr bröttinni og skella vírarnir niður og gleypt menn í sundur. Þannig að við fórum aldrei þeim með einum borð í skipinu, þannig að það gæti verið stór hættulegt. Þannig að þeir voru vel undir þetta búnir og þeir ætluðu ekki að hleypa okkur borð.
It was more mischievous, I think. We took a lot of it in fun. I don't think we realised the seriousness of it then. To us, it wasn't a serious matter. And that was the way we approached it. We would throw potatoes at the gunboats. You know, that is the way the fishermen viewed it. It was a bit of fun.
In 1961, Britain accepted the now almost universal 12-mile limit. In return, Iceland destroyed their well-kept records, bringing this war of nerves to a close. The 4 years of the First Cod War had seen a total of 37 Royal Navy ships and 7,000 sailors, protecting the fishing fleet from the 6 Icelandic gunboats and their 100 coastguards. In 1972, 10 years later, Iceland elected a left-wing government in favor of extending the fishery limit to 50 miles. Britain immediately took the dispute to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, while the trawlers and the Icelandic Coast Guard prepared for a second cod war.
We have from the beginning said that we don't think the court has jurisdiction in this case, and we have let the court know, and the British government and the German government know, that we do not think these indications binding for Iceland in any way.
The extension of the fishery limits to 50 miles is not based on our selfish interests, but on our responsibility for rational utilization of fish stocks.
The extension to 50 miles, of course, was greeted with, a great deal of hostility. Again, it was seen that people were pushing out into international waters, the freedom of the sea was being challenged. The whole potential future of vitality of this industry, which so many people relied, was being compromised.
The court meets today to announce its decisions.
The International Court of Justice ruled in Britain's favor. Iceland now had to rely solely on the Coast Guard and their small fleet of gunboats to protect the fishing grounds.
Það var nú viðbúnaður svona í sambandi við var verið að æfa upp göngur í skip og svona farið á námskeið hjá lögreglunni í sambandi við að beita kylfum og þess háttar. Þeir sögðu nú svona húmóristarnir að það hefði nú ekki verið meiri undirbúningur fyrir útfærslu hjá gæslununa en að setja meiri olíu á skipin og tepparleggja á stjórnstöð.
We're determined to carry on fishing inside the 50-mile limits. We're absolutely determined. And if it does take the same lines as the last cod war, we had to do so much haven time. They make havens, one on the northwest coast of Iceland, one on the southeast coast. But this haven time does restrict a man's ability to catch fish on his own.
On the 1st of September 1972, the British fishing fleet set sail. In readiness for the Icelandic Coast Guard, the skippers had taken the precaution of painting over the trawlers' names and numbers. They also took pirate flags to hoist on entering the 50-mile limit.
Nokkur skipti þetta engu máli, við þekktum það alla. Við erum búin að vera innan þessi skip í 20 ára og ef nýtt skip koma þá var það bara sem að setja í safnið. Og það skipti okkur engu máli. Ég man ekki eftir hvernig, við hefum bara þekkt Peter Scott. Það var ekkert mál.
In the face of British determination to fish the waters, the Icelandic Prime Minister Ólafur Jóhannesson permitted the Coast Guard to use their secret weapon, a trawl wire cutting device that had been developed towards the end of the 12-mile dispute.
Og þetta svona bara eins og slæða sem með hnífum inn í. Og ég held ég fari með rétt að þessi hnífar hafi verið teknir úr vegheimilistönnum og síðan þegar þetta kemur á vírana og það verður span, semst það mikið átak á vírunum þegar togurinn dregur trólu eftir sér, mikið viðnám og þá þetta bara svo fiðlustrengur sem fyrir burtu þegar klippuna lenda á vírunum.
All your trawlers stop fishing. Otherwise I have to report your action.
Right, old Charles, for 106, the anti-boarding device coming up.
Þeir voru alltaf að spila Rúl Britannia þegar þeir þóttust vera í svona jákvæðum málum. Það gekk eitthvað vel hjá þeim. Þá vorum við þarna að messa yfirmörðum að þeir mætti ekki vera þetta og þeir voru með þetta hefðbundna kjartaði við okkur og þá var ekki heimilt að klippa.
Hafa strax stoppaði grammófóninn og öskra bara hjálp og hjálp. Það hýði þarna allir flotinu.
Fyrst voru þeir alveg sko bara mállausir, undrandi. Þrálaust ekki bara fara, þeir skildu þetta ekki. Og það var náttúrulega allt brjálað, allur flotinn hann kom þarna sveglandi og ég held við voru eitthvað 20-22 og þeir ætlaði bara að keyra okkur niður á staðinu og bara klára dæmi þarna. Við gerum þetta í aftur. En það tókst nú ekki.
I think the fishermen and the owners felt that it was an extremely stupid and very dangerous occupation and would almost inevitably lead to loss of life.
Tilfelli var að þetta var skorið djúpt, langt niður í sjónum og teygjan sem var á vírunum, hún fór bara í sjóinn. Þannig að stundum vissum við ekki að við höfum klift fyrir að við sáum endan að koma upp hjá þeim og þeir vissi ekki heldur.
Well, when it recoils back, if the lads had been stood in the pounds, it would have just, well, it could have killed somebody quite easily. You know, it could cut them in half, it's as bad as that.
Og þarna sáum við hvað við gátum gert án þess að beita hefðbundnu vopnum, án þess að Bretar fengi færi á það að skjóta okkur með það með þá ástæðu að við hefðum byrjað vopnaburð. Þetta var ekki vopnaburð. Þetta var bara heimatilbúið íslenskt amboð og átti ekkert skylt við neinn hernaðartækni.
And it's like a small nation against a big nation, what the hell else can we do? So they thought, well, chop him up and we'll hit the trawler owners in the pockets. I didn't go for it at the time, you know what I mean? If I'd have been the Icelanders, I'd done exactly the same, you know. If you don't want somebody on your doorstep, then do something to get them off it.
Putting that gear back together again took 18 hours solid slog for all hands to rebuild that gear and put it back on the deck. And to their mind, it was 18 hours for nothing. They weren't getting paid for putting that gear back because it wasn't catching many fish. That was heartbreaking, particularly after, by the time he got the gear rigged up and shot away, the fish has probably moved anyway.
In addition to the ongoing cod war, British fishing was dealt another blow when the country opted to join the common market. The fisheries policy opened up Britain's own grounds to their new European partners.
When Britain entered the common market, as it then was, the European Economic Community, in 1972, nobody bothered about fishing particularly because it was assumed that we would catch fish in Iceland. Therefore, when they insisted that a condition of membership was that fish should be treated as a common resource to which everybody should have equal access, it didn't particularly matter to the big owners, it mattered to the inshore fishermen. Then suddenly people woke up with horror, what's going to happen?
Off Iceland, the Coast Guard's wire cutters were proving highly effective. By January 1973, the trawler skippers had had enough and threatened to leave the fishing grounds if they didn't get protection. But this time they did not want the Royal Navy to specify where they could go. Instead, they wanted the Royal Navy to follow them.
I would think that we've no choice whatsoever what we do about it. We can't fish here, it's impossible. We therefore have to leave, there is no choice of it.
Þeir sigldu út megnið af flotanum og hótuðu því að þeir kæmu bara heim ef þessu héldi áfram og þeir fengi ekki meira aðstoð frá enskum stjórnvöldum. Vildu nú herskip, en fengu það ekki það sinn, en fengu það dráttarbátana.
Well, Lloydsman was a very powerfully built but slow ship. She, just as the gunboats were much tougher and had a thicker skin than we did, Lloydsman was tougher and had a much thicker skin than they did. And I don't think any of the gunboats thought that Lloydsman was a joke.
And he come out with these oil rig ships, these tugs. I said, what do you think they're going to do? in bad weather at Iceland. I said, what speed did they do? 10 knots. I said, you must be crackers. I said, 10 knots? I said, do you realise what the Icelandic gunboats steam at? And how long was it there? These tugs and whatever that was the secret weapon. It was, it was the best laugh of all, I think.
Icelandic Coast Guard, you are requested to hold your gear.
Dissatisfied with this ineffective protection from the wire cutters, the trawlers again threatened to leave the fishing grounds in May 1973. This would have been tantamount to surrender, so the Royal Navy returned to support the tugboats.
Now, for the first time, we have got the unanimous support of the industry that the Navy should go in. This was one of the purposes of my visit to Hull on Thursday, to try and find out from the industry whether they would support, because I've always felt that unless the Navy had the full support of the industry, it would be very difficult for them to help, even if they did go in.
The Icelandic did cut my troll-ups 3 times to my knowledge. The only one time it was in a stern fisher, a fresh fisher, but she was a stern fisher, the CS Forester. 2, the British Coast Guard vessels. One had a liaison officer on board, a friend of mine, Mick Osborne. And I called Mick Osborne up, HMS, I forget the name of the ship. I said, Mick, we have found a few fish marks. We're going to shoot our troll. Can we have some protection? He said, yes. I speak to the captain. We shot the gear. And Mick Osborne, my friend, said to me, right, Dick, we arranged with the captain. 1 British gunboat will be tight on your port quarter. The other one will be tight on your starboard quarter. The Agar cannot get between us. He said, we guarantee. So we are fishing away. And I looked aft and I thought, them British gunboats are very close. You wouldn't get a cigarette paper between the 2 British gunboats. And the Agar was circling ahead of us. He gave us the official warning. Well, I wanted to answer him and laugh, but I thought, no, that's too disrespectful. So I didn't say anything. And he started coming on my port side at full speed. I thought, crikey, there's got to be a collision. And as our gunboat, HMS, forget his name, I'll call him HMS Useless, and he was tight on our port quarter. And as the Agar got down our port side, the British gunboat backed away to port. And he just circled us in one motion and bang, the explosive cutter went. And it chopped our port warp. So I called the captain of HMS Useless up. I said, what's this guarantee you'll give me? He said, we are terribly sorry. There would have been a collision. I said, yes, I know that. And the captain of the Odin knows that. I said, it was only you. I said, you should have stood your ground. You would have squeezed him in between me and you. Oh, he said, we can't do that without permission from Whitehall. Oh.
Iceland's argument was for the conservation of the cod stocks, while Britain claimed historical rights to fish the waters.
Þegar breski stjórnmálamenn eða reyndar fjölmiðlar voru að reyna að leita að glöfu í okkar málflutningi, reyna að finna mismunandi viðhorf innan ríkisstjórnarinnar eða önnur viðhorf í alþingi eða hjá alþingismönnum heldur en hjá ríkisstjórninni eða hjá almenningi, þá tókst það aldrei. Íslendingar voru innilega sammála þetta stóra hagsmunamál sitt.
We believed that we had these rights for so long and that we were entitled to have them. And there was no sound explanation given as to why we shouldn't have them. Now, we knew about the internal political situation in Iceland, which was you've got a communist minister there who was trying to run the show, and he wanted to get rid of everybody in every respect. He wanted to get out of NATO. We knew that, but that wasn't our view.
We are very few, we Icelanders, and we have fought for a long time for our independence here in Iceland, and we have learned it that the basis for our independence is economic independence. Therefore, we all realize that to prevent the fish stocks around Iceland from overfishing, that means nearly to say everything for us in Iceland regarding our independence.
Don't make me laugh. There was no problem of conservation there.
Wasn't there?
And all the fishermen knew it.
On the 16th of October 1973, Britain and Iceland opened negotiations. The Cod War had become a millstone around the Tory government's neck. Ólafur Jóhannesson, the Icelandic Prime Minister, flew to London.
Well, it goes without saying that I would not have come if I had not any hope. It is my convictions, it has been my convictions, that is best for both parties to come to some peaceful and interim arrangements.
And he wanted us to get out. Well, in the end, we reached an agreement about the ones which we would continue to occupy and the number of boats we would have. And that if any boat cheated, then it would rightly be withdrawn. That was accepted by both sides. We went on fishing, and I don't think the Icelandic government always realized it, but we got a very satisfactory result.
No factory trawlers were allowed inside the 50-mile limit, and the total catch of the British fleet was limited to a quota of 130,000 tons. Certain fishing grounds were strictly off-limits. But shortly afterwards, the Icelandic Coast Guard caught the Hull skipper Richard Taylor on the forbidden grounds. A notorious character, he had already served 2 sentences.
It's the most bizarre capture I think the Icelandic Coast Guard will ever get. About 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, right, you can take over now to the mates. And I showed him the chart. I showed him the toll that we were making. I said, here's the limit line. You know your positions of the backland on the radar and all that. And I left it to him. I was very tired. I said, call me at 7 o'clock in the morning. I said, regardless of what fish we get, we're going home. Because we're nearly full anyway.
Það var þegar samkomulega hafði á sér staði, það var gengið í gildi fyrir við 50 mílurnar. Þá erum við á eftirlitsferð í kringum Hvalsbak og komum þarna að togara og sem reyndist CS Forrester.
About 5 o'clock in the morning, he comes shaking me, skipper, skipper. So what time is it? He said 5 o'clock. I said, another 2 hours. I said, come on. He said, the gunboat wants us to haul our gear. How far are we off the backland? He said, 31 miles. I said, crikey. I knew then. I said, you need to be 33 miles off this particular piece of background. That's sad. So I come on the bridge. Gunboat's tight alongside of us. With my past record, I thought this time I'm going to get 5 years. Well, he can sink the ship if he wants to, as long as the crew's okay. Well, that's so I started steaming to the Faroese limits.
Og það var nú margsinnis búið að reyna að koma vitinu fyrir Taylor, bæði útgerðin í Englandi, Hása sem þá var eftirlitsskip Breta á Íslandsmiðum.
He was firing blank shells at us, and we carried on and we got very close to the Faroese limits. And the Icelandic captain called me up and said, I've just been in touch with Reykjavik. I've got to stop you at all costs. The first shell that hit us, the ship shuddered. It shuddered. And I looked down and thought, crikey, he means business, this guy. But there can't be very good shots aboard that ship.
En svo skipti ég bara skyttu og setti þriðastýringu sem reyndar hafði nú aldrei snert á fallbyssu til þess að skjóta og það var bara 100% nýting. Það skaut 2 skotum og annað fór í gegnum togarann og hitt fór þarna, eins og ég segi, inn í rafvélarúm og stoppaði.
And they arrested me then. So I said, well, you'll be going out to Littleroan again, your old holiday camp.
Iceland discovered that the fish stocks were shrinking further. On the 15th of October 1975, the limits were once again extended, this time to 200 miles.
I did appreciate that the 50-mile limit was more difficult for them to police. But when they declared 200 miles, completely off the continental shelf, it just didn't seem right. What right had they to claim a whole continental shelf to themselves?
Síðasta þorskastríðið á Íslandi heyja Bretar ekki til þess að tryggja hagsmuni sína inn í framtíðina. Þeir heyja það til þess að kaupa sér tíma fyrir hönd fólksins í Hull og Grimsby, einkum og sér í lagi að semja upp á nýtt sjávarútvegsstefnu Evrópubandalagsins. Það gekk síðan ekki.
We gave away the right to our own waters in Europe and at the same time didn't provide for the continuation in Iceland. And when Iceland, I think, inevitably extended its waters to 12, to 50, to 200, and 200 was the last one, then suddenly people woke up with horror. What's going to happen?
And it was sheer hypocrisy on the one hand to be demanding the extension of 200 miles of continental shelf so Britain could get oil, but then deny the same facility to Iceland. And it seemed to me what you've got to do there is not sending gunboats, but send in a bit of intelligence and a bit of common sense and find agreement.
By the end of November, the Royal Navy was once again patrolling the fishing grounds, while the politicians talked. It was clear that this time the stakes were much higher.
The equipment had improved by the time that we went the second time round. So off I went, but I had a brief with the Admiral before I left, and a brief from the staff before I left, and it was quite clear that this was a very different situation from that in 1958.
I was a young frigate captain. I had a captain at sea, senior to me, a four-stripe captain, and so he told me what to do, and the politics was quite a long way from my life. And there was, of course, an admiral above him, and then there was the Ministry of Defence and the politicians above that. So we were a long way down the ladder. And as far as politics were concerned, we had a very clear set of rules of engagement which told us what we could and couldn't do.
We always, right from the beginning of our patrols, were warned, and very properly, that we were going up to deal with a group of expert seamen who'd been used to operating in rough conditions, and we had to be extremely careful that here was somebody who was actually much better at doing this sort of thing and in a better ship than we were.
Used to try and match them, and always try to have a collision on the port side, so that in international law we would be seen as being in the right, because international law says that ships approaching on the port side give way. So if you have a collision, the ship on the port side is the one that's at fault.
Þeir ætla að varla mig kæmist að landinu. Sigldi alltaf þannig að ég gat aldrei byggt að landinu. Og þá var einn sem var þetta, þannig að ég var við rest, þá var ég bara að beygja á að þá hef ég keyrt á helviti, það er sjálf því viljandi, og þá komst ég í burtu. Það ger ég viljandi, vera að viðurkenna það núna.
and I was given a beat, if you like, a patrol line, and went up and down that waiting for something to happen. And I began to think, oh dear, this is going to be boring. And then suddenly, Tyr came out of the undergrowth and started heading towards the defended area. So the next frigate, Tartar, and I went off together to intercept the Tyr, who was obviously coming towards the trawlers.
En þeir voru mjög linknir í að koma okkur í þá aðstöðu þegar þeir fóru utan í okkur, að þeir væru í rétti svona myndrænt séð en samkvæmt siglingareglum þá vildum við meina að þeir væru í órétti vegna þess að þeir hefðu siglt okkur uppi. Það stendur þar einhvers staðar að skip sér siglur annað uppi, það að víkja fyrir því að sjá til þess að það lendi ekki í klemmu við það. Og það gerði, þeir kom alltaf aftan frá og sigldu fram með okkur.
Here, this is Brighton. I intend to hold my lawful course. I intend to hold my lawful course. Clear the area away from the fishing fleet. Clear the area away from the fishing fleet. Clear Brighton. Over.
Og það má kannski segja að hann vægir sem viti hefur meira, en maður kunni ekki alltaf við að láta beygjast fyrir þeim. Þetta þá hélt bara stefn og hraða óbreyttin eins og maður ber samkvæmt siglingarlögum, og þá var það afrakstur. Þó standum líka í þeim að ég fór afrakstur í lengstu lög. Það svona, maður getur ekki munið allt í einu.
There was a rather buccaneering spirit on board. The sailors could see that we were mixing it with the gunboats to protect the trawlers. It was very obvious what was going on. So they thought it was good fun. And they went round the ship saying, go on, sir, bash into them and all this sort of thing. And if I'd taken their advice, it would have been disastrous. So we did exactly actually what our rules said, because it was the most sensible way of doing it, was heading them off.
On the 20th of January 1976, Iceland threatened to break off diplomatic relations with Britain unless the Royal Navy pulled out of the 200-mile limit. Once again, the Icelandic Prime Minister flew to London, this time accompanied by experts on fish stock depletion.
Fundirnir voru haldnir in the cabinet room í Downing Street number 10, og Wilson satt þar á móti Geir, og munurinn var sá að þegar þessi hlutir kom til umræðu þá vísaði Geir þessu til okkar vísindamanna, en Wilson reyndi að útskýra allt sjálfur, og hann satt fyrir saman okkur með feikilegan langan reiknistokk og reiknaði ýmist prósentur af aflanum eða tonn, en það var ekkert samkomulag það. Og það bætti náttúrulega ekki úr skák að það var tekið hádegisverðarhlé fyrir daginn sem við vorum þarna, og þá komu þær fréttir að það var búið að klippa aftan úr breskum togara.
We've bent over backwards to make conciliatory offers. I don't believe any other country in the world would have made so many constructive suggestions as we have made to the Icelandic government to try to end this dispute.
The negotiations came to nothing, and the Icelandic ambassador was called home. All diplomatic relations ceased, and the conflict at sea escalated.
We knew very little about the political background. In my opinion, this was a war that shouldn't, a phony war that should never have happened. It was caused by diplomatic ineptitude, probably on both sides.
They were quite distinctive characters, and they commanded their ships in different ways. Some were more aggressive than others. I mean, we knew a little bit about them because they were all known to us before the Cod Wars as individuals. So we had little character sketches of most of them. And we always knew if somebody was on leave and somebody else was driving instead, or whatever the form was. Yes. Oh, the driver of Balder, and I can't remember his name, but he was very aggressive.
Leander, station 1, station 1, Leander,
Já, það byrjaði svona átök eins og gerðist. Díómeda var að verja togaraflota. Móttum að reyna að komast inn í flotan og geta beitt klippunum. Og það endaði með því að hún sigldi á okkur, sko, en þó ekki, jú, alvarlega má segja það, eða það urðu skemmdist, þó skemmdir á varðskipinu. En fyrir rest, þá gætt hún ekki að sér.
It seemed to me on that particular afternoon that he was determined to damage my ship. 20 attempts at collision, 4 successful.
Afturendin á Baldri, hann sökk inn í bakvagnsíðan á hann, stjórnborðsafturendin á Baldri sökk inn í. Og hann skildi eftir, já, ég veit ekki, 10 metra rifu þarna í síðan á honum. Þetta var raunverulega hann sem sá að rífa skipið vegna þess að við vorum búin að slá á stopp þegar hann lenti á okkur.
He was heavier and stronger and better built, and he had this tin opener on each of his quarters, which was very effective.
Það kom heljar mikil rifa á hana. Þar á meðal fór hornið þarna inn á bar til þeirra, setjastóð yfir mann og hreinsaði veggjónum, myndir af þeim konum sjónunum.
We managed to save the photograph of Her Majesty the Queen, but regrettably His Royal Highness Prince Philip got lost in the action.
Lloydsman, this is Scylla. How do you receive? Over.
Scylla, this is Lloydsman. Yes, I'm receiving you fine, over.
Good evening, old man. This is Scylla. I have some information for you. The Icelandic gunboat Ægir has just left Territorial.
Svo var nú mjög vinsælað fyrir það var að það var í gegnum fjarskiptin. Það var þannig til dæmis þegar 200 míla síðu var að þá eltu freigáturnar okkur á varðskipunum og hérna melduðu alltaf stað, stefnu og þess áttar á svona korters hálftíma fresti til að láta togarana vita að því hvar við værum. Og þetta voru þeir að gerðu fyrstu dagana og við byrjuðum á því með þá að taka upp á segulbönd þessar meldingar og hérna og síðan einhverjum dögum seinna þá byrjuðum við að spila þessar meldingar fyrir þá og hérna sem voru þá rangar, þá voru við einhvers staðar alls staðar annar staðar og þá fórum við að rugla rýmin og þá byrjuðu bresku herskipin að kalla út að þetta heyrði ekki þessa tilkynningu, þetta hefði verið fölsk tilkynning og þess áttar og þá náðum við því upp á segulband þannig að við gátum farið að þegar þeir voru að senda út raunverulega tilkynningu um stað okkar þá gátum við spilað inn í heyrðu ekki þessa tilkynningu, þetta var röng tilkynning þannig að þeir gáðust upp á þessu mjög fljótlega.
Okay, boy. All British trawlers, all British trawlers, all British trawlers, all British trawlers, all British trawlers. This is
plus the fact the Icelandic Coast Guard skippers, they knew the score. I mean, they was playing football on their own ground. It was their territory. They know the weather, they knew the banks where the fish was likely to be. And the British gunboat captains just know how to pass the ports, you know, after dinner. Very handy in a cod war.
Frétti þetta einu fréttamanni útlanda sem var hjá mér borð þegar þetta verst þegar ég hefði aðgerðið klukkan rétt fyrir 6 því að það er dinner hjá þeim klukkan 6 og þá fara þeir í uniform með hvítt hálstau og slaufu og fá sér, ég held ég fá hann ekki með einn viski fyrir mat það er voða lítið vín en svona þeir eitthvað að vera og svo borða þeir allir saman nema eitt sem upp í brú en svo byrjaði því að ég byrjaði alltaf rétt fyrir 6 að djöflast í einhverjum togara og þá var kallað í battle station og þá enginn fekk að éta.
There is a picture of the Royal Navy which exists throughout the world almost, that the Royal Navy captain goes from the bridge down to his cabin and has a gin and tonic. There's a steward, and life is genteel. The British Merchant Navy, all the commercial ships, have the same view, and still do. And of course it doesn't exist. But I have to say that once the Navy's on task, it's extremely dedicated. There's no drinking at sea. The rum tot had gone out by the time this Cod War was, so there was no rum in 1976. The rum went out in 1970.
The fishermen of Hull and Grimsby worried about their future.
Well, we're involved as much as they are.
They're involved in it. Everybody's involved in this trip.
No, they haven't.
But we ain't seen it, and we don't know what's going to happen.
There's nothing to tell us what we're coming up to or coming for anything new. So I'm a bit bitter about it.
I'd rather be on the dole, sat home, let them think it all over. And then when they've got something sorted out, then we'll come back to sea.
Well, the old point is I should think I should be looking for a job when I get home.
Little progress was being made, so John Prescott, the MP for Hull East, went to Iceland to try to find a solution.
I went to meet the captain of the Coast Guard ship, who was known in our British press as the Mad Axeman, and he was standing, and there's a snowstorm, and he was standing at the gangway join it with this kind of scrambled egg on his head and soup scarf and a goatee beard. Everything what I saw was a German U-boat commander just saluting me. And I saw a BBC camera team come round the corner, and I could see that picture at home, you know. We have just sunk 3 trawlers today, Mr. Prescott, you know.
Og hann kom borð og vildi fá að tala við mig og jú, það voru hérna í höfnin í Reykjavík og bauð hann upp á kaffi þá. Það var svona utan dags og ég átti að vera í fríi. Þetta var geðugur maður, ungur maður, óð mikið á honum, talaði mikið eins og stjórnmálamennum tamt. Þannig að það komst enginn að nema hans sjónarmið, ég var alveg sama, át mína kleinu bara.
Well, I want to talk to the people who give the commander his orders, not only the government, but the public opinion that influence the situation at the moment. And this was put in as a chance to meet the commander, and I've taken it along the lines of meeting everybody here.
John Prescott mounted an independent operation, and the Foreign Office kept telling him to come home. He wouldn't come home. He came to see me when he did come home with his own peace plan. I can't remember what the details of the peace plan were, but I know that we turned it down out of hand. It might not have been very different from the peace plan which was eventually negotiated.
John Prescott, the MP for East Hull, played a very brave role in trying to bring the two countries together and trying to get a compromise. But he was very much a lone voice. The wise voices urging compromise, urging the fact that it was inevitable that Iceland would take control of its own waters and would want to catch and land its own fish, part of nationhood, that those wise voices were very little heeded.
The collisions at sea became increasingly dangerous. One Icelandic officer died after such a collision, but by a combination of sheer luck and skillful seamanship, there had been no other losses. But on the 6th of May, 1976, the rules of engagement changed. The Royal Navy were given orders to carry out full protection.
Up until that evening, at about 7 o'clock, the rules, as far as the British warships were concerned, were very restricted, and we'd been told to do the job as best we could, but not in any way to get in a position where we would be damaged. That's our own ships would be damaged. Well, this made it really going into battle with your hands and feet tied together, and you really couldn't do anything.
Þetta voðalegt ástand að vera hermaður á velvopnuðu skipi og láta sem hvern björgunarskip ángra sig.
And then at 7 o'clock on May the 6th, the change in the rules came through to say that we were now allowed to carry out full protection and to ensure that the frigates did their job, there was the possibility they might get damaged in doing it. We made it absolutely clear to each of the gunboats there that the rules had changed.
Og þá voru allir hættir togarana og við vorum að fara yfir svæðið og enginn að fiska. Svo allt í einu kallar loftskiptamaðurinn í mig og segir að það er einn að fiska fyrir framan okkur. Ertu viss það, segi ég. Já, ég er viss það. Hann er á 3,5 míla ferð. Og við tökum stefnuna þangað og þeir voru hérna rétt fyrir aftan okkur á Pálmót.
Tia was the vessel I was marking, and she suddenly decided she'd go after one of the trawlers with her cutter down. And having a cutter down, it's quite clear that she only had one action in mind, and that was to cut the trawl of the trawler. So I closed in on the port quarter, about 100 feet away, 30, 40 degrees behind, so that she couldn't hit me, whichever way she turned, and sounded a short blast and hoping that she would veer to starboard to keep away from the trawler. But she didn't. And a minute later I sounded again and then turned to starboard and hit her in the port quarter.
Ég var nýkominn í koju og var ekki sofnaður sko. Búinn að vera eitthvað lengi á löppum. Svo var ég allt í einu bara kominn upp á vegg úr kojunni, bara líka á þýlinu. Það sem er djöfullinn sjálfur, það er ekki svefnfriður fyrir þessum mönnum.
Og kemur svona á mitt þyrlufarið og yfir vélarrúminu, þannig ef hann hefði kætt gat þar þá voru náttúrulega grunar það, hann ætlaði að gera það, þá voru búin að vera sko, þá hefði vélarnar stoppað.
We had this awful incident where she heeled right over to starboard and then came round port side to port side, which was quite horrific and quite horrible.
Og þá hringi ég niður í vélarrúm og spyr hvort það sé allt í lagi þar. Já, segjum, það er smáleti en það er ekki keyst.
And I hoped that no one had been thrown over the side, so I asked the captain if anyone had been thrown over the side, and he said, I don't want any help from you.
Skipið það snýrist alveg 180 gráður, snýrist alveg við, og þá sé ég togarann hérna rétt hjá okkur og ég setja fulla ferð því klippurnar var úti.
So having unwound myself and got myself into gear again, I took up the same position on the port quarter of the Tia as she approached another trawler with her cutter down.
Það er svona 5 mínútur þá er ég búinn að klippa án trollið. Þá er hann alveg hinn trítilóð eins og ég get vel skilið það.
I did the same routine, sounded a short blast, waited a minute or so, sounded again, waited again, and sounded the third time before I turned to starboard and hit her in the same place.
Hann keyrir þarna nákvæmlega eins og við fórum á hliðina og þegar við komum upp úr þeirri dýfu þá verðum við varið við það stoppuðum báða vélarnar þegar sko úr á hliðina. Það er eitthvað annað í vélinni.
Fortunately, no one was hurt, no one was killed, and no one, there was no damage done to people. And at the end of that, it appeared the 4 gunboats then decided that they would retire. And that appeared to me to be virtually the end of the Cold War, at least the end of the Cold War up there.
This is Leander. Have you got any casualties? Over.
No, and thank God for that.
The previous month, the Labour Party under Jim Callaghan had been elected to government in Britain. Anthony Crosland, an MP for Grimsby, was appointed Foreign Secretary. He was given the difficult task of ending the Cod Wars.
Það voru stöðugar samningaumleitanir í gangi og það var verið að vinna þessum málum bak við tjöldin.
Ég held nú að Bretar hafi líka verið búin að fá sig fullsadda af þessu stríði við okkur Íslendinga. And Tony Crossan sensibly took the view that this was an absurd dispute. And even though he was Member of Parliament for Grimsby, I mean, he was prepared to concede more to stop the Cod War going on.
When he became Foreign Secretary, I just went to him and said, "Do you want a deal? The deal's been arrived." He said, "I haven't seen it." Sent for it. He sent for the deal. He went, got Friedel in Norway, and the deal then was negotiated. It was less than what I came back with, but at least it was a deal, and based on the deal I brought back from the Iceland government.
Well, a lot of people won't like it, but I've warned people in Grimsby for some time that because of the whole universal movement to a 200-mile limit, that the position of the Grimsby fishing industry was going to change and that we would see a decline in the distant water part of the fleet, although we shall certainly see a very large increase in the inshore and near water part. So I think that, I mean, I'm perfectly content to go down to Grimsby and defend this, even though it will be unpopular with some parts of my constituency.
The agreement was signed in Oslo on the 2nd of June 1976. It ended distant water fishing in Britain. The devastation was summed up by Tom Nielsen of the British Trawler Owners Federation. In an interview with the Icelandic press, he said, "You have won a great victory, and that I don't want to take away. The sad thing is that you've put a hell of a lot of hard-working and good fishermen out of work."
I was told once by a government minister that fishing was 1% of the total British manufacturing output. Fishing was 1%. So what chance did we have when we was just 1%? They didn't care a hell about us.
They were promised by the government that there would be compensation. They were promised they would have retraining. They were promised help with development so that new industries would come in diversification of the local economy. And very little of that was actually fulfilled because it was then found or thought that the fishermen were casual workers and not entitled to redundancy because the renewed their contract on each trip. This was the argument. It wasn't true as it turned out.
The trawler owners were paid £32 million in compensation. The trawlers were then tied up, scrapped, or sold to other countries.
I'm not critical of the owners for getting the decommissioning money. They did lose a loss of revenue. But what about the poor? The deckhands and the crews, they never got a penny. When our involvement with Iceland, fishing-wise, when it ceased, that was the end of an era in Hull.
Promises made by the British government to the fishing communities were not kept. Thousands of families lost their livelihoods overnight. So in 1983, the British Fishermen's Association was formed to fight for compensation and redundancy payments.
These are men, ex-trawlermen, typing out letters with two fingers on a typewriter, doing it all for themselves, not helped by government, not helped by the trade union movement, having to do it all for themselves. So I think governments of various persuasions are to blame for this current situation.
Over the years, we've written to the Queen. Prince Philip has been written to, but obviously they state it's not a matter for the palace, so they redirect it. We wrote to Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister some years ago. We wrote to John Major, and we're also written to Tony Blair.
In July 2000, the persistence of the ex-fishermen and the local MPs paid off. 25 years after the Oslo Agreement, £26 million was earmarked as compensation for those who lost their livelihoods in the Cod Wars.
British foreign policy is full of occasions when we've withdrawn from things. Normally we kill a lot of people first. There may be an example in history where we have withdrawn, retreated, capitulated in the way we did over the fishing dispute, but I can't think of one. That doesn't mean we were wrong to do it. It just means it's historically unique.
The Hull docks were a sad sight.
Þegar maður gekk fram hjá tugum skipa sem búið var að leggja við landfestar til varanlega, að þá upplifði maður og upplifði ég að við hlytum að hafa valdið þessu fólki miklum skada. Og mér var þetta hvatning til þess að við þyrftum að gera okkur grein fyrir því, að hafandi staðið fyrir því og átt hluta því, að þeim var ýtt af okkar miðum og þeir eruð að leggja sínum skipum, að við eruðum að gæta sóknarinnar í okkar fiskistofna og gæta þess að það veri aldrei gert of frekar á þann veg að þeir byggðust upp og eldust og framtíðin og íslensk ungmenni gætu notið þess á efri árum og alltaf framvegis að fiskistofnarnir við Ísland væri í góðu ásigkomulagi og gætu þolað eðlilega sókn.
Setting out on the barge with actor Timothy Spall tomorrow at 8:30, in another chance to see the first part of Somewhere at Sea. And next tonight there's a late night movie. Stay with us for Crimson Tide.